Hello, my name is Clemons Jr. I am making this video in a 3-part video testimony of how I am firmly accusing my disgraceful attorney, Mr. Scott P. Batey, of severe misconduct in his duties. And my major goal is to ensure that he is held accountable for the misconduct and that he never gets to do what he did to me to anyone else ever again for the remainder of his life. Please like, please share, please comment, please spread this video to as many people as you know. Please share this video with lawyers or news professionals or journalists or influencers or anyone that can help me hold my attorney accountable for his misconduct and provide me closure with how this particular man severely harmed me while handling my case. Now on to the video. God bless you and your loved ones in your travels. Hello, my name is Clemons Jr. and I wanted to talk about the lawsuit I won against my former employer, Pomeroy I.T. Solutions Sales Company Incorporated in 2021. I'm going to give a backstory and then I'm going to talk about how my lawyer completely dropped the ball on this and ask for your help in figuring out anything that I can do to hold this man accountable for what he did after he won the lawsuit. So the backstory is that on a day after the New Year's break had concluded, I returned back to work for Pomeroy, and in that particular day, our manager had let the group know that QVision systems were priority 2 tickets, which means that they had to be solved in 8 hours or less. After the Christmas and New Year season had concluded, there wasn't an update on that particular instruction. And so what happened was there was a QVision ticket at the Kroger in Livonia on 5 Mile near Merriman, which had a QVision setup that was malfunctioning and needed some repairs. Normally, these QVision setups are priority 4 tickets, which means they're typically solved in 3 days. They're not particularly high priority tickets to focus on. And so normally I would have went to do other work that I was assigned before doing that ticket. Because of the fact that management had given an explicit instruction to us to make those priority 2 tickets and that instruction hadn't changed, I went to this Livonia call as the first call of the day. So I went to the Kroger in 5 Mile and Merriman, and I proceeded to investigate the QVision system. They had, from my recollection, 3 QVision monitors in the store at the time. There were 2 large QVision setups in the cashier lanes, and then there was 1 QVision setup at the accounting desk where Kroger handles their MoneyGram transactions and bill payment transactions and card loads and things like that. So I went to the back of the store to get an 8-foot ladder to set up to examine the first QVision setup. And as OSHA requires, you have to ensure that your work area with the ladder is secure and safe and free from anyone who's in the area that's not specifically using that equipment or authorized to use that equipment. So since I didn't have barriers provided by the company, I used shopping carts in Kroger as rudimentary barriers to basically channel traffic around my ladder to minimize the risk of the ladder falling and breaking equipment or injuring someone or injuring myself. During the time that I was working on this QVision with the 8-foot ladder, management kept removing my barriers. And I put the barriers back because the store was particularly busy this day. And I can't be aware of tens of people, doing their shopping like they would as customers. And so I set the barriers up to make sure that no one would accidentally bump into the ladder and have the ladder fall on them. During this time, for some reason, when I contacted the Kroger support desk, they were taking a very, very long time to look at this particular system. I believe I was on hold for something like 30, 45 minutes, almost an hour, just waiting for them to validate that the QVision in the store was working properly. And after I got off of hold, they said that particular QVision setup was fixed and that it was providing the numbers necessary for management to know how to manage employees in the store for placing them in the front lines to ensure that customers were able to leave the store as quickly as possible. And so after I finished that first QVision setup, I put my ladder up and I left out the store. And after, of course, letting the front manager know that I had completed the QVision with Kroger support and that I was completed with this particular job. So I went to my car and started writing my notes. And then I noticed in the notes that they had mentioned another QVision setup that was near the self-checkout lane in that particular store. So realizing that I still actually couldn't close the ticket because it mentioned multiple QVisions, I went back into the store, let management know, oh, hey, there was actually another QVision setup I needed to check out. And so they said, okay, you can go ahead and do it. So I went to the back and I got a 10-foot ladder. Now, how I know this ladder was 10 foot is that there were several different types of ladders that I could use to perform actions in the store for IT equipment that was in the sky, hung down and suspended, set up by the Pomeroy project team. And so the 12-foot and 14-foot ladders are completely uncarryable. You would either need like a shopping cart or it's like a 2-man carry. The 10-foot ladders were heavy and I could still carry the 10-foot ladder. So I got my 10-foot ladder. I carried it to the front of the store where the QVision was, and I set up the ladder. And I also had gotten a shopping cart barrier, and I set it simply at the corner of the ladder. And I set the ladder up parallel to the attendant who was there with their management station for the self-checkout, which meant that my ladder basically completely blocked off that convenient exit by the self-checkout. And so everyone who was in that area would have had to take a longer way to get out the store temporarily while I was working on the QVision. There was a black woman in the area who was requesting help. She kept saying, sir, sir, sir. And I didn't know if she was speaking to me or to the attendant. And so what I did was I said to her, Miss, I'm sorry. You cannot go past this way. You're going to have to take the long way out of the store. I'm currently working on this particular QVision that's up here in the sky. That's to the best of my recollection. I did write a written statement about this where I recalled everything at the time, writing it down. This is just coming up from what it is that I recall that I specifically did. And so after I made that statement, I proceeded to work on the QVision. I contacted Kroger support. I performed the 5-minute reset that they request us to perform first, which is simply powering down the devices, waiting 5 minutes for the capacitors to drain of power so that's completely drained, and then turning it back on to see if that solved it, and if not, follow up with Kroger support. So during the time that I was waiting for the timer my company provided iPhone to complete, a white woman walked up to my ladder. And I believe she appeared to be middle-aged, maybe in her 30s at most. And she asked me, oh, hey, can you move the barrier so that I can use my cart to get past out here? And I said to her very directly, in a very confident, strong, and assertive tone of voice, no, you cannot push your cart past my ladder. The barrier is there for a reason. You're going to have to take the long way out the store. And so what she did was she decided to take her hand and put it on the safety bar of my ladder. And that action was her saying to me that she would be willing to use her entire body weight to pull down my ladder with me on it. As soon as she did that, I grabbed onto the ladder as secure as possible. I was fearful, and in as loud a voice as I could muster, I said, "Let go of my ladder. Let go of my ladder. Let go of my ladder." And I know everyone that was within, say, 5-10 feet of hearing that could hear me say that. And it took her a minute to gather herself. She let go of my ladder. She had a quizzical look on her face, wondering why is it that she did that. And then she calmly walked out the store on the long way, as I had stated to the people who were in the area that that's what they needed to do the first time. During this time, the attendant didn't intervene, management didn't intervene. No one came from Kroger to ask what was the hullabaloo about. And of course, she got to leave the store calmly. No one attempted to stop her or figure out why she did what she did. And so I just kept working. A second white man walks up to my ladder, decides to move my shopping cart barrier out the way, and push his cart full of groceries, probably 20, 30, 40 pounds of groceries, right past the corner of my ladder where he could have clipped it and I would have potentially fell off the ladder because of what he did. So what I did was I climbed down the ladder. When I got to the second step, I jumped off. And while I was doing this, I said to him, maybe what I needed to do was make the ladder fall on you so you understand why I put that there. And once I did, and he didn't respond, he just kept walking. And I decided to put my shopping cart barrier right back where it was. Then a third white woman walked up. She appeared to be in about her 40s. The white man beforehand also appeared to be about in his 40s. And she walked up, and instead of speaking to me, she spoke to the attendant and asked him, well, can we move this shopping cart so I can just move my groceries out here? And then I said, no, miss, you may not move my barrier. Then she yelled in my direction. I don't recall what she said. I just know she yelled in my direction. And then I said to the man who was the attendant, please call management. So we contacted management. I waited for management to get there. When management got there, they were extremely combative. They said to me, you know what? You have to move your ladder at an angle to where people can walk past the ladder and push their carts past the ladder. You can't use your ladder to block off the area while I'm working. And I said, no, I'm not going to do this. And no, I'm not going to do this. What the way I recall saying that, though, was it was an attempt to explain to them why I was doing this. They just came in my face and they were just combative, yelling at me and screaming at me about what I needed to do. And then they attempted to give me a direct order to move the ladder so people could walk past it. And in an exasperated tone of voice where I was fearful and I was scared of disobeying a direct command from management, I said, no. And what she did, the manager did, was the manager took the ladder and repositioned it in an aggressive manner. She didn't care if the ladder would have fell. She didn't care if the ladder would have wobbled. She just aggressively moved it in a way where people would have been able to push their carts past my ladder. After that, I left the store, and she was yelling in my direction, are you going to take your ladder back? And I said, no, I'm leaving. One thing before all of that happened was, as they were yelling in my face, I had contacted my supervisor and said to him, hey, they're yelling in my face. I'm attempting to do this ladder job. I can't do it. I don't feel safe. My supervisor told me to just get out of there. So during that time, I had already contacted supervisors and management, and the manager at the time, he took it out. He told me to get out, so I did. And then when the store manager came to me, I said, well, do you want the contact information for my direct manager? And he hand waved me off, and I walked out the store. And during that time, I had to put the Kroger support person I was on the phone with on hold because of all of the commotion that Kroger management had started. Once I finished the call with the Kroger person, I talked to management about it, and management said to me that I needed to set the ladder at an angle so that people could walk past it. And that didn't make sense to me because OSHA regulations clearly state that if I cause harm to somebody while using a ladder at work, I am just as liable as that person potentially, depending on whether or not I followed the regulations for using a ladder. So after that event happened, I wanted to go home. The management directed me to do another ticket in Brownstown for replacing a cashier monitor. So I went to the Brownstown Kroger. I did the monitor setup. They were pleasant, they were wonderful and kind as they always had been. That particular ticket was completed without incident, and then I went home. Next day, I'm in a call with HR, the two supervisors, and my manager. And, they're going over the event that happened with me. And I said to them, oh, so now because of what you all are saying, do I have to record every single phone call that we have now because of the fact that you all want to say I have to let people walk past my ladder when clearly that's illegal? And on top of that, these people were practically attempting to assault me and kill me while I was in this Kroger. And the man had the nerve to say while on the call with HR, I never told you to set the ladder up to let people walk past it. So then during that time, I had talked to a lawyer. His name is Mr. Scott P. Batey. And Mr. Scott P. Batey decided that he was going to pretty much yell at me during that call and say, well, if they don't fire you, there's no damages, there's no case. So then I said, okay, waited for them to get back with me. When they got back with me, they fired me. And they fired me over an event that I had already reported to them was racially motivated because it was only white people that attacked me. The black woman who I had gave this directions to, and not only her, but everyone in the area that could hear me, she didn't attack my ladder. It was the white people who did. And so after they fired me, called Mr. Scott P. Batey back, told him that he fired me. He asked me how much was I making, and I could feel the energy out of my body leave me as I told him that with the base wage plus mileage reimbursement, I was earning $50,000 a year. So he took that information down, and then after he took that information down, it was maybe a couple of days later, they wanted me to sign a agreement and also, write up a written statement about it. And so that's what I did. What I did was I wrote a 5-page significant fact statement. It was very detailed, very thorough, the type of witness statement that you definitely have to create for a very serious case like this. After doing that, I submitted that to them. I gave Mr. Scott P. Batey the $1,200 contingency fee he asked for using a bank check. And then after that, I applied for unemployment. I got my unemployment. And while I was waiting for the proceedings to occur, my lawyer had followed up with me a few months after that to say, oh, hey, if you remember any other racial discrimination events, please make sure you remember them, you recall them. And, I said to him, oh, I have plenty. And so During that time, Pomeroy actually attempted to contest my unemployment the first time. I won that appeal because there was no real disciplinary action that you could take when a person tells you that people attempted to kill you while you were on a ladder. And so I won that first appeal with them. Mr. Scott P. Batey eventually got me a hearing date. It was about maybe, let's say, 10 months or so after the fact. The court documents have the actual date. I'm simply recalling from my best recollection what I have right now. So with the hearing date that was set initially, it was initially just going to be a hearing date to just sort of figure out, hey, can this case be tried? Should we go to jury trial? Things like that. Well, Pomeroy was properly served. They've got proper notice, which is why it proceeded to the hearing stage. And Pomeroy failed to attend the initial hearing with my lawyer. So then my lawyer made a motion for default judgment. And the default judgment hearing was scheduled and it was held. The specific dates and everything are on the paperwork that I will also be, posting publicly for everyone to see. And with that default hearing put in place, before the hearing, Mr. Scott P. Batey asked me about my mental state. I had a history of depression, anxiety, and everyone that would be watching this that knows me at all, you all know what it is. Okay, it's already on the internet. That's my digital footprint. I'm not ashamed of it. That's what I was going through, and that's what I was going through. And I told him, hey, I'm working with my doctor. I'm doing new lifestyle management strategies. I'm getting better sleep. I'm making sure I'm always attending my doctor's appointments to keep up with them. And then he started rattling off numbers. First, he started at, I think like 100,000, then 250, then 500. And I said, and I was just, quiet because I'm like, what are you talking about? Money numbers, I need a job. Like, I get what you want to do here, but I really need a job. Like, I wasn't attempting to lose that job over something that I knew that I had to do because that's what federal law required me to do. So after we had the pre-hearing conference, just to make sure that, all of the statements were going to be made accurate to what I had already written down and what we discussed, the next thing was we had the hearing. And in that hearing, Mr. Scott P. Batey mentioned that there were several cases in Michigan that were like mine. And when they were tried, one person got $2 million in damages and another person got $10 million in damages. And so he requested from the court $1,046,000 in damages. It was $46,000 in front pay, $250,000. No, it was $46,000 in back pay. It was $250,000 in front pay, and it was $750,000 in emotional damages and distress. I do also recall before we had the hearing that I did say to Mr. Scott P. Batey that the effect that this had on me was that I don't want anything to do with Livonia. I don't want to even go into Livonia. I have a severe distrust of white people. He mentioned to me that, the judge was white, and I said to him, I know that, Scott. And I said it that way because I'm speaking to a white person and telling you that I don't really trust white people anymore after what happened to me. And so during the hearing, he asked me the same cross-examination questions that he had asked me before the hearing took place. And I do recall that I made a statement where I basically said, I made every attempt to follow management direction, policy, procedure, the law, to do everything I could possibly do to keep this job. And unfortunately, I failed. And because I failed, I have no idea how to be a good employee anymore. And so after that statement was put through, the judge certified the default judgment. And I said, thank you, Your Honor. And then we left the hearing. After we won that default judgment, I told him after the fact, I was elated, I was ecstatic, I was relieved, I felt that I had gotten justice because I really didn't even know if I had the right at that time to demand to a safe workplace where I can use a ladder without worrying about people bumping into it or knocking me off of it or me falling off of the ladder and being permanently disabled. And it was a great feeling. Now, after all of that happened, his office turned really, really, really cold. There was a point where they wanted me to take my default judgment paperwork down to Citizens Bank to request the employer's bank account information. Now, I know you all hearing that would be like, that's weird. And at the time, I was simply too overwhelmed by everything that was going on for me to really question that. I said, well, he's a lawyer. He knows what he's talking about because he's a lawyer. Maybe I can actually do this. So I followed his instructions. Now, I went to Citizens Bank on Michigan Avenue and Woodward, and I showed them the default judgment. And I told them that my lawyer asked me to request you for my employer's payroll information. And then she said to me, the attendant, that, well, that's just a piece of paper. And I said, but this is a judgment from the Third Circuit Court. It's down the street. And eventually, it was a very quick back and forth. And she requested me to leave, and I was just like, what's going on here? And then she called security. Security came over, and I just said, okay, fine, I'll leave. And it was the same type of traumatic event that happened with Kroger, where I was told that I was the problem for following rules and following instructions and procedure and the laws. And so afterwards, I called my lawyer, and they wanted me to leave the premises completely. But I said, I'm already off the premises. I'm on the phone with my lawyer. And during the call with my lawyer, they came out, and it was auspicious because the way they came out was, like a posse group where the teller was wearing a fur coat. So I guess it was to communicate to me, just because you won a $1 million $1,046,000 lawsuit doesn't mean that you're anything. And so my attorney said to me under that phone call, I did nothing wrong. And so what I did was I followed up with the bank by phone, and I got to a higher up, and the higher up informed me that my lawyer needed to submit a subpoena. So I let my lawyer know that. And then I also asked my lawyer about what I could do about the harassment I faced at Citizens Bank, and he told me explicitly, we won't get anything for that. So that was never resolved with Citizens. I have ceased to be a customer of them. I let the account get closed. I care nothing more about Citizens Bank anymore after that.